think the Anasazi might be linked with the Aztecs. Background, history. The Anasazi, otherwise known as the Ancestral Puebloans, hailed from what is now the Four Corner region of the United States. So this includes New Mexico, Utah, Arizona, and Colorado. Their name's meaning is contentious, with some saying that Anasazi means ancient outsiders or ancestors of our enemies. This was dubbed by the Navajo in their language, then later on translated into English. According to the Smithsonian article that I sourced for this video, the Anasazi civilization could have begun as early as 1500 BC. They are well known for their cliff dwellings, cavas, and pit houses. Also for their pueblos, including the sites in Chaco Canyon. They too built roads, crafted ceramics. They used mineral and vegetable-derived dyes to paint things onto their pottery. They built multi-story houses, and they were skilled farmers. They grew beans, corn, squash, along with other staple crops. Additionally, they built sophisticated astronomical observatories. Modern archaeology believes they built settlements in the open, but later on embarked on the cliff dwellings we could see today. The cliff dwellings we see today have been refurbished. Officially, they have 9 stages of historicity. There's the Paleo-Indian, which they have a question mark, and then BC, which is before Christ, to 6500 BC. Then there's Basket Maker 1, which is 6500 BC to 81. There's Basket Maker 2, which is 81 to the year 500. Then there's Basket Maker 3, which is 500 to 700. Then there's Pueblo 1, which is 700 to 900. Pueblo 2, 900 to 1100. Pueblo 3, 1100 to 1300. Pueblo 4, 1300 to 1600. And Pueblo 5, which is the last stage, 1600 to the year 2000. What I'm reading might be a bit old, but I do believe the official sources do believe that these are the actual periods of Anasazi. Interestingly, the official sources say they came from Siberia when conditions were favorable for them to cross into the New World. This journey was made many moons ago. Siberia, for those who don't know, is in modern-day Russia. However, it's not certain this is exactly where these people came from. Besides, they would have had their own origin stories, as do most Native Americans. Here is a quote from a Smithsonian article, and as we progress, a Navajo Elder will also be quoted for comparison. And I quote, "Curiously, this sprawling settlement, whose well-thought-out architecture suggests the builders worked from a master plan, was created and abandoned in a lifetime between 1240 and 1285. Sand Canyon Pueblo looks nothing like Utah's wildly inaccessible cliff dwellings, but there was a defense strategy built into the architecture nevertheless. In the late 13th century, says archaeologist William Lipe of Washington State University, there were 50 to 75 large villages like Sand Canyon in the Mesa Verde, Colorado region. Canyon-rimmed sites enclosing a spring and fortified with high walls. Overall, the best defense plan against enemies was to aggregate in bigger groups in southern Utah, where the soil was shallow and food hard to come by, but the population density was low, so joining a big group wasn't an option. They built cliff dwellings instead." This article goes on to say that due to data collected through tree rings, the experts know there was a southwestern drought around 1276 to 1299, totaling 23 years. And because of their impressive building projects they embarked on, they deforested the region. Still though, the Anasazi were known to have weathered other droughts too. Why did they leave? There is unique casual explanations for their disappearance, their decline, and their migrations. Some culprits could have been drought or climate change of some sort, social unrest or warfare, even cannibalism. It is known they moved south from Utah and Colorado to Arizona and New Mexico in their 4th Pueblo stage. So this could corroborate what the Hopi believed, that invaders or foreigners from the north came down south. Anyhow, a cataclysm is also believed to have forced them to flee their cliff dwellings. The Smithsonian article has presented theories. Here is one, and I quote, Another theory put forward by early explorers speculated that nomadic raiders may have driven the Anasazi out of their homeland, but, says like, there's simply no evidence of nomadic tribes in this area in the 13th century. This is one of the most thoroughly investigated regions in the world. If there were enough nomads to drive out tens of thousands of people, surely the invaders would have left plenty of archaeological evidence. Here is another theory proposed in the same article. So researchers have begun to look for the answer within the Anasazi themselves. According to Lexon, two critical factors that arose after 1150, the documented unpredictability of climate and what he calls socialization for fear, combined to produce long-lasting violence that tore apart the Anasazi culture in the 11th and early 12th centuries. There is little archaeological evidence of true warfare, Lexon says, but there were executions, as he puts it. There seem to have been goon squads. Things were not going well for the leaders, and the governing structure wanted to perpetuate itself by making an example of social outcasts. The leaders executed and even cannibalized them. Apparently, a Hopi elder relayed a history that around a millennia ago, savage strangers coming down from the north came around. At first, these visitors were treated with kindness, but this relationship turned sour. The newcomers foraged their hospitable host, massacred them, and devastated farms. In response, the Anasazi built the infamous cliff dwellings, but this attempt failed eventually, and those who survived a month-long battle of carnage fled south. There is a bit of evidence that supports such claims. In 1993, a Kuckelman and his crew excavated a site of a major massacre. The remains of 41 individuals were found, at least. They even recognized indications of cannibalism, scalping, decapitation, and a face removal practice that deboned the poor soul into a portable trophy. The Anasazi did practice cannibalism, according to all the evidence. Some have found such claims offensive or condescending towards Native Americans. This sentiment was felt by both natives and Anglos. Here is another quote from the same Smithsonian article, and I quote, "Christy Turner of Arizona State University really pushed the argument. Turner's 1999 book, Mancorn, documents evidence of 76 different cases of prehistoric cannibalism in the Southwest that he uncovered during more than 30 years of research. Turner developed 6 criteria for detecting cannibalism from bones: the breaking of long bones to get marrow, cut marks on bones made by stone knives, the burning of bones, anvil abrasions resulting from placing a bone on a rock and pounding it with another rock, the pulverizing of vertebrae and pot polishing, a sheen left on bones when they are boiled for a long time in a clay vessel." To strengthen his argument, Turner refuses to attribute the damage on a given set of bones to cannibalism unless all 6 criteria are met. Not too long after, Richard Marlar, a biochemist, and his team from the University of Colorado did find compelling or irrefutable evidence of just this. The Anasazi site called Cowboy Wash. In this site, excavators dug out disarticulated skeletons of victims, 7 in total, whose bones bore most of the hallmarks of cannibalism, laid out by Christy Turner. The irrefutable evidence was found in human coprolite, or fossilized excrement. Additionally, a child was found with a smashed mouth, indicative of a food preparation of sorts. Myoglobin, through analysis, was found on the inside of cooking vessels and surfaces. There too was traces of this protein on 2 stone axes and 4 hammerstones. Myoglobin is a protein found primarily in the muscles of vertebrates, including humans, and it plays a crucial role in oxygen storage and transport in muscle tissue. There's a whole process used to find human myoglobin. They could test for it with blood or urine samples, but to find it in the anthropological record is a different process. So to detect human myoglobin in archaeologists, scientists primarily use paleoproteomics, the study of ancient proteins. This process involves extracting and analyzing protein residues from organic remains such as bone or feces, and identifying species-specific proteins, fingerprints, using sensitive mass spectrometry techniques. This method was famously used to find human myoglobin in ancient Pueblo artifacts, a key piece of evidence in a cannibalism debate. And there is limitations of immunological methods like lack of reliability, cross-reactivity, contamination risk. So all of these are a part of the process and play a factor. Now would be a good time to decompress. Breathe in, breathe out. It's noteworthy to know and understand that over a third of cultures of Earth, through warfare or ritual, had practiced cannibalism. Some form of human sacrifice on behalf of the power field even carries on today, except the way that it's been repackaged and understood has changed. Let's continue. Experts conclude that they still don't understand the mysterious disappearance of the Anasazi, but it is a likely combination of factors that culminated into the destruction of what appears to have been an anomalous yet advanced civilization. What the Navajos believe. It's paramount to include the Navajos' version of their own history. In an attempt to gain knowledge of the Anasazi, anecdotal assertions from Navajo Elder Wally Brown will be examined. According to Wally, not just curious students of history, but Native Americans themselves have been convinced the Anasazi had an extensive timeline of civilization. He claims this simply isn't true. He claims these people were only around a short period, possibly 300 years. They had differences from local or the original inhabitants. The first is the Anasazi worship different gods. Okay, they worship the darkness. Apparently, the old people had a way to distinguish what was Anasazi or what wasn't. They, again, according to Wally Brown, came from the south, opposite of what the Hopi believe. Exactly from where, no Navajo teaching has an answer for it. When these strangers came to the southwest, they encountered peoples already inhabiting cities. In this case in particular, the Puebloan site of Chaco Canyon. Even before the arrival of these unholy strangers, the Dene, or the Navajo, arrived to the southwest from the east coast. Fleeing disputes, they too encountered people already living in the area. The Dene arrived to the southwest, according to the Navajo, around 2,000 years ago. The Anasazi were the first to have captured and enslaved people in that region, from whence they gained the power to take advantage of the surrounding peoples as well. Natheless, Anasazi could not overtake the Dene, or the Navajo, because they were numerous. Ironically, they gave the Navajo their own name. Anasazi referred to the Dene as field people, which, according to Wally, is pronounced Navajo in the language the Anasazi spoke. The Anasazi mocked the holy people. After all, they worshipped something wicked. Wally Brown goes on to emphasize how or why the Anasazi vanished. It's not that they actually disappeared or left due to some cataclysmic event, like a drought. No, they are said to have destroyed themselves. Though Wally also states this destruction was expedited by the Dene, it must be stressed that these people were utterly destroyed, so that not much evidence other than artifacts remain. They, the Anasazi, believed themselves to be greater than the gods the Navajo praised. Wally quotes an Anasazi, and I quote,
"So, it may be something that you should recognize. You should worship us."
The Dene responded with, "No, we can never worship other people as you require." As stated earlier by the officials or academia, they state that more than one thing happened to the Anasazi that ultimately led to their downfall. Wally goes on to corroborate the proof put out by official sources that the Anasazi practiced cannibalism, and they too conducted human ritual sacrifice. including sacrifice of the little ones. You catch my drift. Whom they are also believed to have cannibalized. On the contrary, the Dene were known to be a peaceful folk, despite all of this wickedness that they seen around them. They still traded with these wicked people. Howbeit, the ancient Navajo needed items they had no access to. In particular, Navajo used a yo, or pearl, which the Anasazi had. They too valued this item, the Anasazi. Other curious items the Anasazi possessed and traded were colorful birds of large size. Some things Navajo used to trade with the Anasazi included bark or cliff rose and wild potatoes, corn squash, and beans. He goes on to reiterate that the Anasazi were completely different from the rest of the folks around. While he states some of the people that were enslaved or imprisoned turned against the Anasazi, when collapse was all said and done, all the surviving ex-slaves returned to their previous way of life. Unfortunately, practices of the Anasazi endured, including the practice of slavery. Once before, slavery was criticized by the Dene, but following the destruction of the Anasazi, some Navajo had ambitions to take advantage of slavery. The individuals who decided to carry on this practice decided to move away. It must be understood that many different languages were spoken in the Southwest. Not all Puebloans or cliff dwellers were one and the same. They were different. Accusations of dark or black magic. They made their prayer offerings to the darkness, is what Navajo Elder Wally Brown claims. Their principal economy was the slave trade, in which they even had breeder-type people. The walls built in the Pueblo site were not to keep people out, but to keep people in. This was to prevent escape. Even children and older people would be subject to labor. They were so evil. Even after they were destroyed, the surrounding peoples of the region went out of their way to overkill the destruction, so that even any remains of the Anasazi, such as pottery, were broken up and destroyed. They had such evil and demonic ways, to a point where even the objects they used were cursed. In blasphemy, the Anasazi would brag about their ability to transfer hearts of one dog into another while simultaneously keeping the dogs alive. When the holy people brought on their destruction, they hastened the process by bringing about a great wind to go over the area in an effort to destroy crops and to drive the inhabitants out. These gusts of retribution caused rocks or bricks to cave in and wells to dry up. It's safe to hypothesize slaves built altars inside kivas. We can still witness today. The likely function of such altars were for animal or human sacrifice. Portentously, the etymology behind Chaco is referred to as the place of crying in Navajo, thus the name of the Pueblo site, Chaco Canyon. And so I bring up slaves building altars as a way to demonstrate how twisted these people, the Anasazi, really were. They had people that they were going to end up sacrificing, right? Build the sacrificial altars, right? If that ain't evil, I don't know what is. Anyways, here's my thoughts on all this. The evil spirits completed their mission, which was to destroy. Once they succeeded, as they often have everywhere else in the world, they move on. And at the end of the day, these evil spirits, these demons, these fallen angels have a hatred for mankind. What matters to them is to destroy us. Our folly is their employment. The slaves were not all from the same place, so the construction they were forced to do had subtle yet noticeable differences that can be witnessed even today. The design, the textures, the patterns would vary depending on where the slaves were from. Some construction techniques have log poles coming through a wall. Some use different thickness or size of brick. Also, the pattern in which the bricks were stacked also varied. Parallels with Aztecs and Anasazi. Based on evidence, these diabolically vile people weren't some renegade branch off of the Aztecs. The timelines just don't add up. Rather, renegade Mayans or Toltecs, perhaps. What if they were already a part of a cult long before they encountered the Diné? Did they break away from their former place of origin? Were they not runaways or criminals? Did they lose a war? Were they nomads? Whoever they were, nobody truly knows. Though for centuries, they have been referenced and linked with Aztecs, dating back to Spanish arrival to the southwest, whom used Aztec as a term to name spectacular sites that they stumbled upon. This misnomer withstood the test of time, but despite this misconception, is there evidence of an actual connection? Official sources don't claim to know the exact date the people who were to become the Mexica or Aztec arrived into the basin of Mexico. The dates given vary, ranging from 1100 to 1200 AD, which is when the Nahuatl-speaking peoples began arriving into central Mexico. It wasn't until hundreds of years later they finally settled down and founded the great city of Tenochtitlan around 1325, which is now Mexico City. According to the Aztecs themselves, their land became dry and parched, forcing them to seek opportunity elsewhere. Coincidentally, unless you don't believe in coincidences like I do, but for the sake of it, coincidentally, timelines, sort of at least, align and correspond with Anasazi timelines, meaning their heyday, and this is the Anasazi's heyday, was sometime between the years 700 and 1300 CE, and their decline was between 1200 and 1300 CE. Now, if the CE is confusing, let me break it down. BC is before Christ. AD is after death. Now, they've also switched things up and made it a bit more confusing. CE is actually AD, okay? And they also have other dates that they throw out there like BCE. I believe they do this just to confuse people. But let me keep going. The dates of their decline matches Aztec migrations to the south. Again, and rather propitiously, the Mexica began arriving into central Mexico between 1100 to 1200 AD. Again, the Anasazi's decline was officially 1200 to 1300 CE. Now again, the CE and the AD, it's a bit confusing, but it's the same timeline. The Mexica, over time, settled into central Mexico. Okay, so they made multiple migrations, right, over 100-year timeline, or hundreds of years actually. And remember, the Anasazi were said to have suffered droughts, and the Aztecs fled a land that became dry and parched. Both cultures are accused of practicing dark magic as well. All this took place 7 centuries ago. Another parallel is that they both masterfully engineered spectacular structures. Though these buildings do exhibit clear differences in construction and style, the Anasazi were not known to have made or built pyramids. The Aztecs did, or refurbished a lot of pyramids that they already stumbled upon when they arrived to the basin of Mexico. This fall of a sophisticated empire and the rise of another even greater empire, setting chronology aside, was also substantiated through a transmission of customs, ceremonies, rituals, essentially religion, most notably the repugnant practice of ritual human unaliving. In fact, the Aztecs took it to a level far beyond what the Anasazi could have even gotten away with, primarily because they were able to scale this reprehensible tradition due to the larger population of Mexico. Side note, the Aztecs inherited what was left of the Toltec Empire. Anyhow, the Aztecs, like the Anasazi, were destroying themselves by fraternizing with demons and fallen angels. by worshiping such black-hearted beings. On the flip side, they were phenomenal masons, mathematicians, sorcerers, artisans, engineers, and astronomers. They had educational systems, skilled dentists and surgeons. They were master horticulturalists and are still famous for their innovative chinampas, aka floating gardens. They had knowledge, technology, money, and things. The problem is the price tag all their success, all their accolades came to. The amount totaled in complete and utter destruction. It cost them everything. Just like the Anasazi, the Aztecs were anathematized with the most infernal passion by the surrounding kingdoms, while being jinxed by the diabolical spirits they worshipped. The neighbors of both parties banded together to drive out and put an end to a wicked empire. The difference was the magnitude. Eventually, with the arrival of the Spanish, came the end of a once mighty but unequivocally evil empire, akin to the destruction of the Anasazi. Although this time it wasn't just other indigenous groups that joined forces to destroy the Anasazi. The conquistadores, along with the Catholic Church, for better and for worse, assisted. Together, these two groups burned the works of the Aztecs and repurposed many of their buildings to construct churches under the false pretext that everything the Aztecs did was a work of the devil. Conclusions. The conflicting as well as contrarious accounts only adds to the mystique of the Anasazi. A theory of mine is that they are a group of peoples that didn't come from the north like the Hopi Indians believe, but the south. And my suspicions lead me to believe that they could have been associated with the Mayans, because I too believe that the Mayans destroyed themselves through worshiping the darkness. Out of it, they got knowledge, they got wealth, power, but ultimately it was momentary. They, the Mayans, as far as I am aware, are the greatest Native American civilization that ever existed. The problem is, they all of a sudden vanished. It's like they were doing something one day and just got up and left everything behind. It's not similar, exactly like what happened with the Anasazi. Perhaps the Anasazi were a kind of nomadic cult that roamed Central or South America, but they couldn't settle down. That is, until they made it to the Southwest. Because they came from the South, this people group would have been exposed to more higher, sophisticated forms of civilization, rendering the local inhabitants at the time defenseless against the evil tactics of the Anasazi. Other assertions of mine would have been that the Aztecs could have or would have absorbed other peoples migrating from wherever into their empire. I wouldn't dismiss that descendants of some potential survivors of the fall of the Anasazi empire would wind up in Aztec territory. But I just don't think that this is the whole picture, because it seems like the Anasazi became the Aztecs. Another alternative theory that I have is, what if the Ice Age, over one of its melting stages, closer to today, trickled waters down into the conditions that were fit for agriculture in the Southwest? This icy age did thaw out, which led to wetter, drier, and hotter climates. Perhaps this receding global glacial period gradually made the Southwestern territory much lusher and conducive for human flourishing. Then, the climate entered its stage that we see today, which is a dry desert climate, driving, over time of course, inhabitants away. Though the Navajo and others have thrived in these inhospitable, hot and arid climates for centuries, so we can't point to changing weather conditions and say that this is exactly why people left or a civilization fell, right? It's the Anasazi. The whole thing is still one big mystery, but it's kind of coming together now. Now, I do without a doubt believe that their civilization was destroyed, right? And the survivors had to flee. And from the stories that I'm hearing, it was a multifaceted destruction that I don't believe happened in one day. It was a whole bunch of things that ultimately led to their downfall. What has happened with the Anasazi parallels to what is happening today. After all, every great empire has fallen. There is no exceptions. Now, if you want to be more pragmatic, or if you want to approach this from a secular angle, empires, they get fat, sloppy. They start making attempts to squeeze their citizens, which leads to more, and more. Incompetent people get put into positions of power. This nepotism causes dysfunction. Is any of this sounding familiar? The citizenry rebels against the oppression they face, including poor living conditions. People in general become immoral, degenerate, and nihilistic. This only exacerbates the woes of a declining empire. The rich and the powerful prioritize their interests, leading to a lack and value of respect for human life. The rich and the powerful also pit people against each other. Okay, this is an age-old practice. People then develop hatred for one another. Today, this is done in too many ways to count. But an example is at work. It's called competition. Anyhow, under these conditions, a civilization will destroy itself. The United States, just like the Anasazi, has and is worshiping the darkness. Literally. Okay? We had money and things. We got knowledge. We got technology. We embarked on building projects, public works that were the envy of the world. We, at one time, had good educational systems, the best in the world. A fairer justice system than it is today, especially if you were white. But just like the Anasazi, the United States is anathematized by its neighbors and the world. Countries are teaming up to protect themselves against a tyrannical rule of an evil empire because the US has went off the deep end. Just like these dark spirits have done elsewhere with every great empire, they've done here in the US. All they could end up doing is destroying. Okay? They will pivot to somewhere else. And because they aren't almighty, these evil spirits, this darkness, it'll take time for them to seep into the next great empire. And they'll offer the same things. Expansion, money, knowledge, it's the same old song.